Information session on Saturday brought back a discussion about transgendered student policies in Michigan. And, the State Board of Education has issued some recommendations for districts in that regard. And Dave Petersen's back with us from Lakeview Schools to talk about that. And we appreciate the opportunity. Hi, Dave.
Hi. Good morning.
Thanks for the opportunity again. This subject is one in which we can easily get tripped up in politics and all of that, maybe even a lack of understanding some of the time. But the point is the State Board of Education came up with some policies therein that they recommended to districts, and Lakeview approved those, as I understand it, as written. So let's talk about what that means. So when the State Board of Education comes up with a recommendation, what do you do as a district leader?
Sure. I can't say there's one path we follow when the State Board comes up with that process.
I see. Okay.
In this situation, we actually preempted the State Board. We started our equity work years ago. And so approximately a year before the State Board came out with their policy, even going public with that, we were working through a real situation with a real transgendered student.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And so in working through that, through our lens of equity, we just put into practice what we thought was right. And then a few months later, the State Board comes out with their policy. We came out with a statement of support. We did not actually come out. We did not adopt their policy.
I see. Good clarification. Okay. So sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? So you had a situation with which you had to have some study and work it out.
Exactly. And what makes this difficult is every student situation is unique. And so to make a blatant statement about this is what we're going to do in this situation just isn't true. Okay. So what we worked out for that student is different from, we actually have had a couple, is different from the next student that came through.
I see.
Taking it, we've tried to, like with a lot of special situations, we try to personalize that to the family and the student as far as what wishes are and work through that.
So when you're confronted with trying to sort out what those wishes are or what the policies should be, what are the concerns with transgendered students?
Very sincerely, the bulk of the concern is with the transgendered student. Is it? We see it locally. We see it in our schools, and it's also backed up by data, state and nationally. Is the bullying is to the transgender student?
Okay.
All the issues are to the transgender student. They don't really bring issues other than the fear of the unknown is really what the rest of people that are non-trans or transgendered, we just deal with that fear of the unknown, and that's what kind of makes this thing bubble up and become more than what it should be.
And we'll talk more about that in just a second on WBCK. WBCK, we're here with Dave Petersen, Superintendent at Lakeview Schools. We're talking about transgendered student policies, and as Dave has pointed out, the district there, out of necessity, came up with a policy before the State Board of Ed did, but of course the State Board did, and a part of an information session that took place this past weekend was to try and spread some information about that. Other districts presumably could endorse that policy, adopt it, whatever the correct word is, and we presume that this will be discussed further. Are there safety concerns? As you pointed out, Dave, there might be a perception that safety concerns are out there when there is a transgendered student in school, but your point is the concerns often are opposite to that because bullying takes place the other way.
Exactly. It's all bullying is really when you have a student that doesn't fit in, and for whatever reason, and then kids choose to use that as an excuse to tease and repeatedly tease and that kind of thing. So that's, you have one or two or just a handful of transgender students in your school. They're not going to form a group and go around and bully people. That's just unheard of. That's just that's not the right scenario.
I see. So as you examine this issue, what were other concerns that you focused on?
The biggest thing was privacy, and privacy for all students. So as we looked at how our bathrooms are constructed, there is ample access. So for all people to have privacy in there, both boys and girls have stalls they can use to maintain their privacy. As far as locker rooms, we came up with it kind of broadened the spectrum, it kind of broadened our viewpoint. Is a lot of kids want privacy in the locker room. Again, depending on your age, you might have gone to school when all boys showered. Back in my day, all boys showered.
Right.
My son's nearly 40. Nobody showered when he went to school. And today, very few kids shower in school because of privacy issues. So it's kind of made us look at it differently about how do we create more privacy for all kids in the locker rooms. Last time I was here, we talked about the bond issue.
Yeah.
And we are going to revamp, part of the bond issue is to revamp our middle school locker rooms. So we will use this thought process to create more privacy in our middle school locker rooms. And then as money becomes available, as the need comes available at the high school, we'll do the same. But how do we create privacy for all kids, not just transgender kids?
So it really became a study that went beyond the issue of transgendered students.
Exactly, and that's kind of how all of the civil rights processes have worked through our history. It starts with one marginalized group, and then you find out, you know what, that kind of works for a lot of people, and it safeguards a lot of people. And this is turning out to be the same thing.
So as you were developing this policy, what was the path that you chose, and did you take into account parents and students' input and so on?
Yeah, I should have corrected you sooner. Is that we don't have a policy.
Okay.
What we've done is we've implemented practice,
Got it.
and because it's a practice that will evolve, it's very difficult to have a parent meeting like this is what's going to happen, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. It depends on, for example, the one student I talked about was going to play athletics, and that person transgendered from being a female to a male, and then he was going to play basketball. Well, before the season started, that person decided not to and actually dropped out of school. But it never got to the point where we had to have a parent meeting and go through the process. So it's just very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all meeting where you can answer all the questions, because it just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. So essentially your approach is a case-by-case study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Dave Petersen is here from Lakeview Schools. We're talking about the issue of transgendered students, which has come back into the focus a little bit with a public meeting that took place this past weekend. Few more minutes now with Dave Petersen, Superintendent at Lakeview Schools. So as you considered the guidelines the State Board of Ed came down with, you'd already been figuring out these issues. Were they essentially consistent, would you say, with your purview on it?
Sure, they were very consistent.
I see.
Very consistent.
So the State Board of Ed then says, take these cases one at a time.
I'll be honest, I should have read them before I came back in here to kind of review that, but I assume that that's what they say.
Okay.
But the biggest thing is that it's the school should take responsibility for all students, and these students fit into all students, and make sure that we safeguard their rights.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard from anyone who was concerned about safety?
No.
Not at all.
Not at all.
That's very interesting.
I'd take that back. About a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, Mr. Bob Wolf did stop in our office and have a long, very, very honest face-to-face conversation. And he was concerned with safety, not just in the school, but on the playing field for athletics, as far as if a young lady transitioned to be a male. I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. If a male transitioned to be a female, how that could create an unfair playing advantage on the court. And there's MHSA guidelines that kind of prevent that from being an issue.
I see. Okay. And Bob was here Friday to talk about his information sessions on Saturday. So this then is, would you say, fairly mainstream? Most districts are dealing with these situations similarly.
No.
They're not.
No, there's fear. There's going back to the state, is that we at Lakeview, and it was long before I got here, is very proactive to do what's best for the students that we serve. And Lakeview never has been one to wait on the state or federal government to to give us guidance. There's schools out there waiting for guidance and waiting for the safe approach. The safe approach for the school as far as administration and bureaucracy might not be the safe approach for the kids.
I see.
And we focus on what's safe for our students.
Well, that might be a cutting-edge position to have.
And sometimes you don't want to be cutting edge, but sometimes you have to be cutting edge. So.
All right. So have you heard any sort of pushback at all on this issue?
Yeah, the one thing that I think I can speak to as a practicing Catholic, I try my best to live my Christian values at work and at home. I do think our school's take on this does follow that. I can remember sitting in the pew about 2 years ago, and I was struggling with some things, and the priest was very firm about our job. You can still live your faith as far as if gay or lesbian lifestyles don't fit our faith, but our job as a parishioner, our job as a Christian on this earth is to accept and love everybody and live our life that way. So as I try to lead this district, I try to make sure that our district, our kids, our teachers love and accept every child that walks through our doors.
All right. Seems like a good place to end that issue. And when we did speak last time, we were talking about the bond issue and all of that. How is that sorted out for you?
It's kind of crazy. We will start construction on Prairie View Elementary and Mingus Brook this spring, and then the rest of the district the following summer. So at least 2 schools will walk in next fall to not a brand new building, but something really updated, very climate controlled, very secure. Safety will be an issue. So those things will be in place next fall at Prairie View and Mingus Brook.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing because now that you know you can do this, you have to sort of figure out how you do this.
All the logistics.
Around school, yeah. So this will be a project that happens once school is out, and they're able to be done?
No, we're going to break ground in March and April.
Okay.
So we will, like, for example, at Mingus Brook, we will have to have the kids and the parents come in a different door so we can start construction in the front of the school to finish this year. The goal is then when they come back in the fall, that it will all be done. As far as getting into the school, there still might be guys working evenings to do some finishing touches.
Okay.
But as far as probably 95% of the work will be done when they come back to school.
Well, that's still a fairly short amount of time to get all of that done. But
is.
Talk about logistics. Come in a different door. Everybody has a routine, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
And those routines have some safeguards built in and so on. You've got to consider all of that.
So, for example, the plan has to be, we have to bring in the fire marshal to make sure that the plan fits fire safety. Sure. All those kind of things have to be thought of before the fact,
And boy, isn't that in the news right now.
You betcha.
About that kind of thing. All right, Dave. Well, we appreciate the update on all these subjects, and we'll stay in touch.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Superintendent Dave Petersen, Lakeview Schools.